For 10 years, Gene Haas survived in Formula One with the cheapest business model on the grid, but it came with a fatal flaw. He never owned his own future. Now, the Savage Junior Stockpile Toyota, just built at Haas, has completely flipped the script, and suddenly, Gene Haas's options just multiplied. But don't mistake this for a charity operation. Haas built his team by outsourcing everything to Maranello, buying Ferrari's engines, Ferrari's gearbox, and taking whatever rookie the Ferrari Academy felt like dropping into his garage. It kept the lights on, but it meant Gene walked into every driver negotiation, holding the weakest hand at the table. He was a customer, not a kingmaker. Then Toyota walked into Banbury. They didn't just bring wind tunnel time or Gazoo racing decals. They brought an entire pipeline. Without spending a single dollar of his own money, Gene Haas is now sitting on a loaded bench of Super Formula champions and hypercar veterans, all getting seat time through a massive testing program funded entirely by a Japanese automotive giant. But here's the million-dollar question nobody in the paddock is asking. Did this new driver pipeline actually set Gene Haas free, or did he just trade one master for another? If you want to know what this stockpile actually cost Haas at the negotiating table, hit subscribe right now. Let's dive into the contract. This breakdown directly illustrates the people, product, pipeline philosophy Toyota is actively installing into the Haas garage. To feel why this matters, you have to understand the man it happened to. Gene Haas built his fortune in machine tools, not motorsport, and he runs his Formula One team the way he runs everything, with a hard eye on the bill. He's turned down buyer after buyer. By Komatsu's account, the questions Gene Haas asks aren't about selling, they're about going faster. This is an American industrialist who scaled his NASCAR operation down to a single car and kept his F1 team precisely because he still wants to win with it, on his own terms, without being anyone's junior partner, which is exactly why the shape of what Toyota handed him is so loaded. It's worth being honest about what the old arrangement actually cost, because it wasn't only money. Leaning on Ferrari's academy meant Haas was always developing someone else's asset. Behrman was a Ferrari product on loan. The moment Maranello wanted him back, or wanted the seat for the next name off its production line, Haas had little standing to argue. Every rookie who worked out was a rookie Ferrari could reclaim. Gene Haas wasn't building a future so much as renting one, season by season, from the same supplier who sold him his engine. Start with what genuinely changed, because it's real, and it's cleverer than a checkbook. Under the deal with Toyota, Haas finally began running a program it had always skipped: testing of previous cars, or TPC, the rules that let a team run a chassis at least 2 seasons old, away from race weekends. Haas had never bothered, because running an old F1 car burns money most midfield teams can't spare: circuit rental, tires, engine mileage, a full trackside crew. Toyota picked up that bill. Across 2025, the team put its 2023 car, the VF23, on track for 14 days at circuits like Silverstone, Imola, and Toyota's own Fuji Speedway. And it filled the seat, most of the time, with drivers Toyota wanted to look at. But be precise about what that program is, because the temptation is to make it sound bigger than the rules allow. TPC isn't unlimited. Since 2025, the FIA caps it at 20 days a year per team, with a hard limit on how far a team's own race drivers can run: 1,000 kilometers across 4 days. And, the part that matters most, you're only permitted to bolt on parts the car has already raced. You can't develop this year's machine on an old chassis, so whatever Toyota is building here, it isn't a secret car development loophole. It's track time for drivers, and the data that comes with them. That's the whole game. Here's the genuine edge in it, the part the hype gets right, even while it overreaches. The normal way into Formula One runs through Formula 2, where everyone drives near-identical machinery, and it can be maddeningly hard to separate a generational talent from a good driver in the best-run car on the grid. A rookie arrives having never felt real F1 downforce, or managed a modern hybrid under genuine pressure. Toyota's answer was to skip the guesswork and hand seasoned professionals actual laps in actual Formula One machinery, then read what came back. Whatever else it is, that's a sharper way to judge a driver than a spreadsheet of junior results. The drivers Toyota put in that car weren't teenagers chasing super license points. The centerpiece is Ryo Hirakawa, 31 years old, a Le Mans winner, a 2-time World Endurance champion for Toyota, and since April 2025, the official Haas reserve. He's the kind of resume no Formula 2 rookie can match. Years of reading tire degradation, managing hybrid deployment, handing engineers the sort of precise feedback a factory lives on. Alongside him, Toyota ran Super Formula champions Sho Suboi and Ritomo Miyata, and brought in old hands like Kamui Kobayashi and Kazuki Nakajima to work with the younger ones. On paper, it looks exactly like the title promises: a stockpile. Toyota hasn't pretended the running is sentimental. When Sho Suboi took his turn in the VF23 at Fuji last August, the team's motorsport director, Masaya Kaji, told motorsport.com exactly what it was: a kind of audition, or selection, meant to measure the driver's real level, and pointedly not a reward for winning a Super Formula title. That's the tell that this is more than sponsorship theater. A sponsor buys visibility. Kaji was describing assessment with consequences attached, which is precisely what turns a handful of test drivers into something an owner can actually bargain with. There's a workmanlike reason some of this running happens at all, and it's worth saying out loud before the story runs away with itself. The rules now force every team to hand 4 first practice sessions a season to rookies, drivers with 2 starts or fewer, and Hirakawa, for all his medals, has never started a Grand Prix, which makes him ideal for filling that quota. Haas has used him to tick exactly those mandatory boxes in Bahrain, Spain, Mexico City, and Abu Dhabi. Part of what looks like the deployment of a factory army is, up close, a small team efficiently solving a paperwork requirement with the best qualified body it has. Look a little closer, and the word stockpile starts to strain. For one thing, none of these men has ever started a Formula 1 race. Endurance pedigree and Super Formula titles are real, but they aren't proof of Grand Prix pace, and everyone involved knows it. For another, this bench was never purely Toyota's. When Haas rolled the VF23 out at Mugello last September, the man in the cockpit wasn't a Gazoo prospect at all. It was Romain Grosjean, 39, back in a Formula 1 car for the first time since the fire that nearly killed him in 2020. Wearing the helmet his kids had designed for a final race he never got to start, with Komatsu himself stepping in as race engineer for the day. That's not a ruthless audition. That's a team using the same program for a heritage run, a goodwill day, a piece of unfinished business. And the fairy tale has bruises. Hirakawa's Haas year wasn't a flawless procession of clean data. He crashed the car in a private test at Zandvoort, and again at the young driver test in Abu Dhabi. None of that makes him slow. Endurance racing is punishing, and he's world-class at it. But it's a reminder that a champion in one discipline is still a question mark in another, and that the distance between a Le Mans winner and a competitive Grand Prix driver is exactly the distance this whole program exists to measure, not to assume. When Haas actually went looking for its next reserve, it didn't reach into the Toyota stable at all. It signed Jack Doohan, an Australian out of the Red Bull and Alpine academies, 7 Grand Prix to his name, no Toyota ties whatsoever. The team can still lean on Ferrari's reserves, Giovinazzi and Zhou, if it needs them. And the most telling move of all came quietly this year, when Haas offered a private test, not to one of its Japanese drivers, but to a McLaren Junior, Gabriele Fornaroli, the back-to-back Formula 3 and Formula 2 champion. That is not the behavior of a team locked inside a sealed pipeline. That's an owner keeping every door open at once. The Fornaroli detail is the one that should end the monopoly theory outright. Here's a team supposedly building a closed Japanese pipeline, and the young driver it's most publicly curious about is an Italian who just won back-to-back Formula 3 and Formula 2 titles and signed as McLaren's reserve. If Haas were bound to Toyota's stable, it wouldn't be booking test days for a McLaren Junior. It's doing that because the 2027 seat market is going to be a real fight, and Gene Haas, for once, wants to walk into it with more names in his pocket than anyone expects. His own, Toyota's, Ferrari's, and whoever else is worth a look. Underneath all that sits the machine back at base. And here's where a version like this usually goes off the rails. Toyota funded a driver-in-loop simulator at the team's Banbury factory, coming online for 2026, the first time Haas has had its own rig instead of renting Ferraris in Italy. It's tempting to spin that into a sealed loop, Toyota's drivers feeding data into Toyota's simulator to make Toyota's drivers look inevitable. But there's no evidence of anything rigged, and the plain facts cut against the drama. Haas still leaned on Ferrari's simulator through 2025, and the team has been open about the Banbury build in its own announcements. What's changed isn't secrecy, it's that Gene Haas finally owns the tool instead of borrowing it. One more thing he no longer has to ask Maranello for. And Toyota isn't shy about why it's there. The partnership was built around a phrase the company repeats like a mantra: people, product, pipeline. And around a chairman, Akio Toyoda, who talks openly about wanting his own young drivers to reach the world stage. By Komatsu's account, one of the first things Toyota asked was whether Ferrari would be okay with all of this. Read it warmly, and it's respect for the partner Haas leans on. Read it coldly, and it's a company that already understands. It's the one now writing the checks. Both readings point the same way. The money in Gene Haas's garage has a name on it, and that name has ambitions of its own. Which brings the whole thing back to the man at the table, and to the limits nobody in the loud version of this story wants to mention. The people running Haas have been blunt about how far the pipeline goes. Performance comes first. Komatsu has said plainly, put a driver in before he's ready, and everyone would just say Toyota bought the seat with money, and that, he insisted, isn't what they do. They pick on merit. He's called Ferrari the foundation of the team, the thing without which Haas doesn't exist. So the stockpile isn't a guarantee of anything. It's a set of options, and options only carry value if you're allowed to use them. Still, options are exactly what Gene Haas never used to have, and you can watch the pressure move across his two seats. Behrman's side stays protected, and it's Ferrari, not Toyota, doing the protecting. As long as the car needs Maranello's engine, Ferrari keeps its leverage, and its academy graduate sits comfortably inside it. The other seat, Esteban Ocon's, has no such cover, and by most accounts, Ocon spent the back half of 2025 being outdriven by his younger teammate. In the old world, Haas would have had to overpay to replace a driver like that, or crawl back to Ferrari for a loan. Now, for the first time, there's a third option sitting in his own garage, and even the possibility of it changes every conversation he has about that seat. None of which means Ocon is about to be shoved aside, and it's worth resisting the tidy fiction where Gene Haas slides a lap time across a desk and a veteran simply folds. Contracts don't work like that, and Komatsu has been clear the team won't install a driver who isn't ready just to make a point. But leverage was never only about what you do, it's about what everyone knows you could do. A team with a credible in-house alternative negotiates differently from a team with none, even if it never spends that alternative at all. That, more than any single seat, is what actually changed for the cheapest owner on the grid. So did Gene Haas's options really multiply? On the surface, obviously yes. The cheapest owner in the paddock now holds the deepest, most flexible bench of his career. Toyota's champions on one side, a non-Toyota reserve on the other, Ferrari's standbys behind them, and a McLaren Formula 2 champion he's already invited in for a look. He spent nothing to build it. For a man who spent a decade with the weakest hand at every table, that's a genuine transformation. But hold the picture up to the light, and the shadow's hard to miss. Every one of those new options runs on Toyota's money. The testing, the bench, the simulator, the headcount that grew from around 230 people to nearly 380. All of it financed by a partner that now has its name on the car and its drivers in the queue. For years, Gene Haas's problem was that he depended on Ferrari for the thing that decided his seasons. He may have just spent his way out of that dependence by quietly building a bigger one, because leverage cuts both ways. The moment your cheapest, deepest, most convenient options all belong to a single backer, that backer never has to buy a seat. They only have to keep being the reason the alternatives exist at all. Ferrari used to hold the door. Now there are two hands on it, and only one of them belongs to Gene Haas. So here's the one to argue about below. When the most tight-fisted owner in Formula 1 finally gets a full deck of drivers and doesn't pay a cent for it, has he taken real control of his own future? Or has he just quietly changed which giant he can't afford to say no to?